Welcome back to another episode of Phantom Thoughts. Today I want to dive down into the lair of the purple worm, chasing a topic I was going to cover on my first podcast before I got sidetracked, as I often do. 3d6 in order, method of generating ability scores. This is the method that often seems to be favored by those in the OSR that utilize the BX version of the game of Dungeons & Dragons and the retro clones and games inspired by that version. So I wanted to really just take a look at the various versions of Dungeons & Dragons and see, where does 3d6 in order fit in? Not surprisingly, it first shows up in OD&D, where that is the only method mentioned for ability scores. But I was surprised to find that in the BX version and the later BECMI versions, it was not in fact straight 3d6 in order. It was 3d6 in order with some alterations. You could take points from other ability scores and apply them to the prime requisite for whatever class it was that you were wanting to play. There were actually a lot of rules, whereas 3d6 in order would be a pretty simple concept, was that you would take 2 points from one score to raise a point in your prime requisite, but that no score could be lowered below 9. Dexterity could not be lowered at all, though it could be raised if that was your prime attribute. And Constitution and Charisma could not be changed. A little more complex version from the OD&D 3d6 in order. And those were the only versions that really only mentioned 3d6 in order. From that point on, you had usually a multitude of methods to choose from. AD&D First Edition actually didn't have straight 3d6 in order as one of its methods. The 4 methods there were 4d6 and arrange to taste, roll 3d6 12 times, and then choose and arrange, 3d6 6 times each in order, which is the closest thing he came to 3d6 in order, roll 3d6 in order for 12 characters, and then pick a character. Actually, that may be closer than the other method. And then, if you go to a little later in the first edition of AD&D, to the Unearthed Arcana book, they added Method 5, where you selected your class, and then you rolled on this table that they had built for each ability, for each class, with a different number of d6 being for each ability score. Anywhere from 3d6 for one ability score, up to 9d6 for what would be a prime attribute for that particular class. The only thing they really had in common was you were rolling a total of 42 dice in total, whatever class you picked. But it could be 46, 5d6, 6d6, depending on the ability score you were rolling for. In second edition AD&D, they did have straight 3d6 in order as one of the choices, but they had 5 other choices. 3d6 2 times, 3d6 and arrange as you will, 3d6 2 times and arrange as you will, 4d6 and arrange, and the sixth choice was every ability score starts at an 8, you roll 7 dice, and you can add the dice as you will, but you couldn't have more than an 18 maximum for any ability score. D&D 3rd edition had 4 choices, what they called organic, which was 46 in order. Reroll 1, switch 2. I'm not sure how that qualifies as organic, but okay. 3d6 and then arrange, which they called customized average. Random average, which was 3d6 in order, so it did appear in 3rd edition. And high powered, 5d6 and arrange. What they called the floating reroll, where you rolled 46 and rerolled the lowest and then arranged. And then this is the first edition of the point buy system, where all abilities started at 8. You had 25 points to spend. And then to raise the abilities above 8, you would spend a point to get a point until you got to 13. From 14 to 16, you would spend 2 points to get a point in that attribute. And for 17 and 18, you would have to add 3 points to get to that point. And they even added some tiers to that to change the starting points anywhere from 15 to 32, depending on if you wanted low or high powered. And then there was also a default array. This is the first appearance of the default array, where you would have a 15, a 14, a 13, a 12, a 10, and an 8, and just arrange them as you wanted. D&D 4th edition had a standard array, 16, 14, 13, 12, 11, and 10, so a little higher than the 3rd edition. They had customized, what they called customized scores, which was another point system, where you would start with one ability score at 8 and 5 at 10, and then you would have 22 points to spend. Going from the numbers from 9 to 13, you spend 1 point each, 14 to 16, 2 each, 17, 3 points, 18, 4 points. And then the third method was 46 and arrange. And then, of course, current 5th edition, 46 to arrange, the standard array, this time 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, and 8, and their variant system was the point buy system. Everything starts with 8s. You have 27 points to spend. From 9 to 13, you spend 1 point each. From 14 to 15, 2 points each, and that's it. You couldn't even get 16, 17, 18. While I was looking over how often do you see 3d6 in order, one thing I noticed was that the orders kept changing. In OD&D, it was strength, intelligence, wisdom, constitution, dexterity, charisma. In BX, it was strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, then constitution, then charisma. BECMI was the same as BX. AD&D was the same, and so was AD&D 2nd edition. So that strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, constitution, then charisma, it stuck as the standard for most of the TSR era after OD&D. Then D&D 3rd edition changed it up again. Strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, charisma. 4th edition was strength, constitution, dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, charisma. And then in 5th edition, went back to strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, charisma. The only consistencies in the order of the ability scores was strength was always first and charisma was always last. But those middle 4 were always getting mixed up together. So what's the point of all this? Other than my own weirdness in trying to figure out how far 3d6 in order went and how prevalent it was. In a lot of ways, the ability scores are viewed as, what is this game? Low fantasy, high-powered fantasy. There are a lot of people in the OSR I've heard that kind of refer to the modern editions as being superheroes. But here's the thing. The one version of D&D where 3d6 in order was the only option for generating ability scores, OD&D, the characters were still definitely superheroes. OD&D was very much linked with the chainmail system for conducting fantasy wargame battles. The basic combat system in OD&D was the fantasy combat system from the chainmail rules. It said so right there in the rules. What we know as standard D&D combat now was an alternate combat system with armor class and hit points and 2 hit rolls. But in the chainmail system, every unit, whether it was an individual unit like a character or an infantry unit, a cavalry unit, a monster of some kind, a giant, an ogre, they were rated according to a specific unit type, and that unit type rolled 6-sided dice, and depending on the opponent and who the opponent was would determine how many dice you rolled for each unit and whether you were looking for just 6s for hits or 5s and 6s or even 4s and 5s and 6s in order to get a hit against that unit. In that system, individual player characters were designed to be able to stand up against entire units of troops. So a fighter or even a magic user could go toe-to-toe with a unit of infantry and not only hope to win, they probably should win because it required simultaneous hits to kill units. It wasn't just, okay, you rolled this many hits this turn, the infantry rolled this many hits this turn, so that knocked down some hit points. That wasn't the way it worked. You had to roll. If it took 6 hits to kill a hero character, you had to roll those 6 hits simultaneously. So if the infantry unit was a low-quality unit, they might not even be rolling 6 dice. They would have no chance to even kill the PCs. That's pretty super heroic. So I think sometimes we look at low fantasy, because there's this notion of, in the OSR, that it was always this kind of, they're just normal people or slightly better than normal people, but they've always been fantastic people. They've always been heroes. They've always been super. That's the game. Other games may be a little grimmer, a little more difficult. And that's not to say it's not difficult for me around this world, because it's a fantastic world. I mean, it has giants and dragons in it. So it's going to be difficult sometimes. But I think sometimes the way we look back at, particularly the BX era that seems to be so popular, is this notion that it was difficult because the characters were ordinary or just slightly above average. The reason it was difficult was because there wasn't the sort almost obsession we have these days with balance in a lot of RPGs, where you're putting the characters against an even situation. A lot of the old school ways of playing were just, here's the world, and there's a dragon over here, and if you want to go after the dragon, you can, but you might want to gain some experience, find some magic, find some allies before you go after that dragon. And that's really what made the old school systems so deadly. It was just that you can go anywhere and you can do anything. The freedom that comes with an RPG above a board game or even a video game, where there are limits. You can go anywhere. You can do anything. But there could be consequences. So 3d6 in order. OD&D, absolutely. BX, kind of, but not straight 3d6 in order. AD&D, not even an option. AD&D 2nd edition, 3rd edition, it's an option, but it's one of many. And 4th and 5th edition, it's not an option at all. Even in the TSR era, it wasn't a standard. And even in the TSR era, it wasn't meant to make the characters ordinary. That's my take. What about you? What's yours? The music in this episode was Strength of the Titans and Late Night Radio by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. creativecommons.org/licenses/by/4.0.